I came across that term connectedness, and it was defined by the People's Awakening team from Southwest Alaska as the interrelated welfare of an individual, a family, a community, and the earth. And that was so beautiful to me because I felt like it was way more holistic than many approaches or worldviews. I think it's really easy to focus on individuals or maybe dyads, parent-child dyads, for example. But that inclusion of the community and the earth was such an aha in terms of how important it is that we recognize that interconnectedness at these more collective levels at the same time.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season includes 25 incredible episodes devoted to the Inner Development Goals. Based on the science of personal transformation, the IDG framework represents 23 skills needed for today's world. And of course, empathy is one of them. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jessica Saniguq Ullrich, an Inupiaq scholar and advocate for Indigenous well-being, a tribal citizen of the Nome Eskimo community and descendant of the native village of Wales. She has dedicated her career to promoting connectedness, healing, and resilience. With a background in Alaska's child welfare system and a PhD in social welfare, she developed the Indigenous Connectedness framework, emphasizing the deep ties between individuals, communities, the earth, and spirit. Now an assistant professor, at Washington State University and a research consultant, her work spans digital storytelling with Alaska Native youth, tribal child welfare, language revitalization, and environmental connectedness. Recognized as an Ascend Fellow by the Aspen Institute, she is a leader in transforming Indigenous social systems. And given her research and expertise, I've invited Jessica to join this special IDG series to explore connectedness, one of the 23 traits of the Inner Development Goals. And I welcome you, Jessica, to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to share your work. And before we get into a conversation that I'm sure is going to be very inspiring for people who are watching or listening, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm taping this show on the traditional land of the Kanien'kehá:ka, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among First Nations. And I am personally grateful to the many generations of stewardship. I support all efforts to nurture edifying relationships with Indigenous peoples based on empathy, respect, trust, and cooperation, all in service to advancing truth and reconciliation. And for those who are listening and learning, I've put a link to the Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Report in the show notes so that you can learn more about why land acknowledgements are so important. I'm going to take a minute to ground myself because I know this is going to be a big conversation. I know I'm going to be flooded with a lot of feelings because your work evokes that for me. Besides the bio, which is obviously impressive in and of itself, I wonder if you might share at the onset a little bit about yourself. I don't know, any stories? Do you like Oreo cookies? I don't know. What would you like our guests to know about so that we have a little lens into who you are?
Yeah, so I would expand a little bit on the bio you shared to disclose that I'm a mother of two amazing teenage daughters who are the lights of my life. Oigana and Otkok are their Nupiaq names. And I am a descendant of amazing, brilliant, beautiful ancestors who have survived so much, and I would not be here today without their love, their strength, resilience. And so I also ground myself and get anchored in this love that I have for my past and future generations.
I love that. I have a soon-to-be 9-year-old, so
Mm.
I'm really grateful that you brought
Yeah.
up your motherhood, and I wish them well.
Yeah.
One of the articles that you've written really stirs up a lot for me, and I want to read back your words and invite you to maybe, you know, add to your words, because I think it's a great starting point for our conversation. So, quote, it is incredibly humbling to see the ways Indigenous communities have maintained connectedness despite the onslaught of colonization. Indigenous peoples have endured and continue to endure the colonial traumas of child removal, assimilation, relocation, institutional racism, patriarchy, environmental degradation, stolen lands, neoliberalism, and hierarchical epistemologies. Despite colonization, something has sustained Indigenous people. This article asserts that connectedness, the interrelated welfare of everyone and everything, has been one of the keys to Indigenous survival and well-being. In this article, I argue that the concept of connectedness is worthy of exploration as we work to destabilize the impacts of colonial disruptions to Indigenous ways of knowing and being. Through the study of connectedness, we begin to see how the disruption of connectedness has been harmful to everyone, not just Indigenous communities. And as I've done with all of my guests for these special series, I'm going to actually read what the IDG definition of connectedness is and then begin letting you speak because you have so much to say.
Mm.
They describe connectedness as having a keen sense of being connected with and or being a part of a larger whole, such as a community, humanity, or global ecosystem. So how does that resonate? And let's talk connectedness.
Yeah. So as I was attending graduate school, I engaged in a very large, I felt like it was a very large literature review process where I was focused on seeing across all of these articles and books from amazing scholars and Indigenous leaders what it was that promoted Indigenous well-being. And I was really inspired to focus on well-being after I received guidance from my community to shift my focus to that because I thought when I was going into grad school, I would be focusing on trauma and learning more about how that has affected our people. And I had elders and community leaders say, well, we've learned a lot about trauma. We've learned about historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, post-traumatic stress, and all these layers of trauma. And they said, and we're grateful for that. And it helps us connect some important dots. But now we need to know what to do. How do we shift this? How do we heal from this? How do we come back into right relationship with one another, given all of these dynamics that have happened at multiple levels in our society, in our nation, in our state, in our community, in our family, and within ourselves. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to study well-being. And I came across several articles that spoke so beautifully to what well-being look like in their in specific Indigenous community. So I'm just looking across broadly. Um, Looked at some amazing work in Canada, in Aotearoa, Australia, and within the United States, partially because these countries experience boarding schools and child removals. And so that was part of why I focused on these countries specifically. But I came across this term connectedness, and that once I saw that, I was like, this is it. This is what was missing within child welfare. So I worked in Alaska child welfare for years before going back to school because I was like, this isn't this isn't working.
Mhm.
We're not getting at the root of what I was witnessing and observing in so many families and in communities. And I was like, we got to come up with something better and different and build something on the side. This is still important work, but we got to do something to address the root, just like the elders and community members guided me to focus on. So I came across that term connectedness, and it was defined by the People's Awakening team from Southwest Alaska as the interrelated welfare of an individual, a family, a community, and the earth. And that was so beautiful to me because I felt like it was way more holistic than many approaches or worldviews. I think it's really easy to focus on individuals or maybe dyads, parent-child dyads, for example. But that inclusion of the community and the earth was such an aha in terms of how important it is that we recognize that interconnectedness at these more collective levels at the same time. And that's when I understood we need this to become our foundation within systems and practices and policies and all of those things once again. But I think many of us are wanting to learn more and go more in depth and understand what this concept looks like, what it means, how it's promoted. And that's part of what I'm trying to do through my research efforts.
I think the timing of this work is so critical right now. I think, the little that I know about Buddhism, I took my first Vipassana retreat last year in December and learned just a little bit that the reason why we're feeling so much pain, at least as it was explained to me, is that we don't understand the true nature of who we are.
Mm.
We think we're like living in our own little isolated bubble of sort of an ego self wandering around the world, and the systems really make us feel like we're agents in the world, but we're like, we're responsible and in charge of things. And there's it's attached to a whole bunch of other, isms, if you want to call them that way. And so their belief is that the nature of reality is that we are interconnected. And if we remember that and behave in that way, not only do we feel more whole and healed, but it's sort of very, tell me more.
Yeah, well, I reflect on how elders have given guidance for generations across multiple Indigenous communities to know who you are, where you come from. And I've heard that so many times over and over and over again in multiple ways and in different stories and contexts. And I think what I'm coming to understand after studying connectedness and building off of that initial concept that was defined to include culture and spirit, as well as connectedness to our ancestors and future generations, was how all of these relationships help us understand who we are, where we come from, and that, yes, we are a unique, beautiful human being with our own gifts to share in this lifetime. And who we are is of a family, of a community, of the earth, and that there's this beautiful diversity that exists across the planet, and how that diversity is needed. We need to maintain and hold on to our diverse cultures, languages, traditions, practices, ways of connecting and building relationships in order to help, the whole planet be healthy and well. And like when that whole planet is healthy and well, and societies and families and communities are healthy and well, how that promotes our own well-being and it sustains us. It gives us an understanding that how we define ourselves is definitely a personal journey. And I'm not going to do that for you or others. That's something that you define for yourself. But I feel like what is at the core of our being is beyond the social constructs, and it's beyond some of the language we even use, where there aren't words to fully describe who we are at the core. Um, but I think about my great grandparents who were born in a time of great change in our community where they had to change their name and take on an English name, for example. And then their Inupiaq name became their last name. And then this whole new process of if someone got married, then the woman changed their last name and took on, the husband's last name. And that was new. That's different than our way of you were just who you were was just your name. But like the massive changes in that way that happened pretty rapidly. These are my great grandparents. That's not that long ago. Um, and how this isn't some super, you know, recent thing. It's still happening today in terms of um, accepting these times that we're in and looking at what can we do now to sort of slow down or question and pause, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it this way?
Mhm.
And that's where I feel like this idea of connectedness, it's not just an idea. It's like a way of knowing and being. And it's part of us anchoring ourselves in this idea of who we are, where we come from.
So I can imagine you as a scholar coming across this framework, this not framework, but this idea, this
Yeah.
connectedness, and then going deep and then seeing how connectedness manifests and what it accomplishes, I don't even like that word, what it illuminates, what it opens up, what it engenders is more the spirit of what I want to say. How was that for you to observe, and how has it informed how you are as a person in the world?
Yeah. So I had no idea what journey I was embarking upon when I first started studying Indigenous well-being and then what has now become the study of connectedness. So I feel like it has helped explain so much about as you, same thing in the quote that you shared in the beginning, like how we've been able to get through some of the hard times and challenges and some of these traumas. And I think that's one of our superpowers, really, when we think about it. Connectedness is how we get through. And connectedness is something that it takes intention, it takes deliberate actions, it takes certain relational actions, is what I'm calling it now, not just cultural practices. I'm like, this is all these things we call cultural practices are spiritual, and they also help us develop and maintain healthy relationships with others and with ourselves. So, this journey of connectedness has, I feel like, helped me heal my heart, my spirit in ways that I never would have ever predicted. And it was actually around my 40th birthday. I had put this prayer out to Creator. It's my day of, celebrating a new year of life and everything. And I put this prayer out to for healing my heart. I was like, I know after studying all this, and this was after I was done with my PhD and everything, I was like, I know I have work to do and I'm ready. And I just put out there, like, please help me. And I had the most magical, amazing day. As a result, I was just like, it was such an immediate answer to this prayer. I was standing in the ocean. It's the middle of winter, and I always take my shoes, socks, boots off or whatever and dip my feet in the ocean. And it's my way of connecting with the water, and I love the ocean so much. And on that day, it was a beautiful sunny day. It's almost after winter solstice, so the light goes down pretty early still. And the sun started to go down behind a mountain. And I felt like, okay, it's setting and I'm connecting again with Creator and saying my prayer and thanking, you know, uh, Spirit for this life. And then right as I finished that prayer, it was the sun popped back out behind the mountain, and I felt like it just shined straight into my heart, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm getting it already. This beautiful healing and connectedness experience. And we drove home, and my daughter at the time, she was, I think, around 10 years old. She gave me her gift, and she painted uh, a piece of canvas that said, "Love comes from the light inside." And I just felt like, how did she know this? Like, I didn't talk to anyone about this being my prayer or intention, or, what what I was hoping would be uh, this year of, processing and feeling and healing and everything. And she gave me that, and I was like, oh my, again, confirmation that, our prayers are answered. And like her little spirit knew exactly what my heart needed to hear, and how much that helped me with my healing journey. And that's where it's like, I don't know how to exactly explain it. I'm doing my best to write and learn about connectedness and share it with the world. But there's something so much deeper about this concept that I don't know if, words fully grasp, but artists and poets and, there's so many out there that are doing such a beautiful job at explaining it too. But they're just talking about it in a little different way.
Well, I feel very connected to you listening to you say that story. That's a beautiful, beautiful story, and I'm so happy you had that experience. And it calls up for me the need to talk about our connection to nature,
Yeah.
Mother Earth. And so, I know in Japan there's a word that they use called Shinrin-yoku, which is like a loose translation into English as forest bathing, which I think is a beautiful concept. And there's research showing how healing it is to spend
Yeah.
time in nature.
Yeah.
And I am a work in progress. I live in a city, even though we have a mountain, and I love to
Mm.
go for a walk or a run on the mountain in the dead of winter when it's minus 30 degrees centigrade. Outside is not
Yeah.
exciting for me, but I know it's good for me. So I
Mm.
just wonder, I'm sure there's other people who are listening and can relate to that. So let's talk a little bit about why we need to have a better relationship to nature.
Yeah. I feel like we could not be alive without the earth, right? It's the air we breathe, it's the water we drink, it's the food we eat. Like, we are of the earth. We are not separate from, and it is a relationship, that we have with this planet. And I feel like the earth has a lot to teach us. And I've been doing some work with my tribe to try to bring connectedness into the community and teach it in a way that it's not classroom style lecture, talk, listen, learn uh, an approach. It's like the guidance they gave was teach this through our way of subsistence practices and teachings, and that'll teach them connectedness. And so we hosted a workshop, and that's exactly what happened across the board. We saw and witnessed people come together who didn't know each other and spend a weekend with each other, but engaging in berry picking or learning about our plant medicines, and um, sharing stories, and getting together and feeding one another, and like just building these relationships. And it was phenomenal, like what I witnessed in such a short amount of time. And we're hoping to expand this out and share more later. But it's like our way of knowing and being is embedded in so much of our ancestral knowledge and practices that are linked to the land. And this beautiful earth is like it's everything. It's like it's part of our identity. And that's what, these instructions of knowing who you are, where you come from is from a land and from a place. And that connection is important, and that knowledge that those communities from those places have about that speck of the earth is sacred. And I'll share one more quick story about the land as a teacher. I was out on a walk last weekend, and going along the Spokane River. I'm currently living in Spokane, and I'm just reflecting and appreciating spring and seeing all the starting to bud leaves, and I'm hearing the birds, and I'm just really enjoying myself. And I come to a place where I can see all of these logs, trees that had fallen down from what must have been a wildfire. And I pause and I'm looking around and I see all this new growth, and there's all these new trees, super dense new growth, new trees coming up, and they're all about the same height as me. And it just gave me such a feeling of hope to see that, because we're living through some pretty challenging times here in the United States right now with this current administration, and feeling like a lot of our work and efforts may be halted because of different changing priorities or and whatnot, lack of funds and those sorts of things. So, but it gave me hope that, and this is that message of like how no matter what happens, connectedness gets us through. And there, even though it's hard and it hurts and it's painful, and we're having to observe a lot of things I know we wouldn't want to have happen, to have hope that we can rebuild. There is new growth opportunities. We can learn from this, and we can change some of these dynamics.
Mm.
And the earth is what provides that sort of like connection and aha, I think, when we open ourselves up and get on the land like that.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a really beautiful expression of the intimate relationship we can choose to have with Earth, because
Mhm.
we are fundamentally of the Earth. I love that so much. And I guess that for the next question makes me think about the connection and connectedness to lineage, and not only lineage that we're all from, but also looking forward. I know in the seventh generation principle is a
Yeah.
really big part of Indigenous ways of thinking and being. Could you speak to that connectedness too?
Yeah, I feel like it's an honoring respect and recognition for what has made our life possible here in this moment in time today, to look back and know who our ancestors are, what they went through, and to see not just through a lens of trauma, but to see that strength and the love and the amazing knowledge and spirit that they celebrated and lived in practice, so that me and generations they'll never meet can have this amazing connection and sense of abundance and joy that is entirely possible. And that's where I've come to understand that across the generations and across our communities, that what we do matters, that it's a shared responsibility. We all have important gifts that we bring, and without everyone doing their part, like this life wouldn't be possible in the way that we get to experience. Um, so I think that is part of what connectedness provides, when we have that understanding of that interdependence and all of these interconnections, that it's an appreciation. For me, it's like, wow, I'm just in awe. Like I'm so grateful, and I feel so lucky to be here and to be talking here with you today, and for the next meeting and the next moment and the next people and groups and all of these interactions that happen. I'm so grateful. and um, and to not take each other for granted, and to have that gratitude and understanding means like there are no hierarchies anymore. There's no false separation. There's no us and them mentality. It becomes a I love us sort of feeling. It's this unconditional regard and mutual respect, no matter who you are, like, and where you come from. I am so appreciative of you. You know what I mean?
And there's
And
echoes of,
that,
sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
no, I was just saying that that changes the energy of how we connect and interact, and how that benefits generations that we may never see or meet ourselves. We're future ancestors in that way.
Hmm. I think it makes me think of these other like spirited words like namaste, the light in me sees the
Mm,
light in you,
yeah. Mm,
Ubuntu, those
oh,
beliefs that we all matter and we brothers and sisters.
yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Mm, mm,
Now, if we get that, I feel like I get that. I mean, I'm like in baby steps getting that. You also write about systems of disconnection, and I think it's
mm,
probably useful for us to actually understand that we still live in systems that work very hard,
yeah.
or are very present to disconnect us or make us feel like disconnection is the way to
Mm,
navigate
mm.
life. So, let's talk about those systems.
Yeah, I think that disconnect and separation and disruptions and those sorts of things have unfortunately become normalized. I like it's just sort of accepted. It is the way it is. It's embedded in many of our policies, practices, um, our beliefs, our actions, and then ultimately how we think of ourselves, like in relation to this environment that we're all navigating in this external world, um, and carrying around our own inner world, you know, within that. So, um, I think that's part of why I try to share as much as what I'm learning is, and I'm sure that's the goal of this inner goal
Development goal.
development goals, sorry,
Mhm.
um, is to help people grasp and understand and come back in right relationship again. And how, when we do that, what right relationship means to me is that I am no longer going to accept being harmed, and I'm no longer going to accept harming others. And we kind of pull ourselves out of that trap of, someone who harms or is harmed, and we take our power back, and that's, to me, is justice. That's what how important being in right relationship is going, no, I'm not going to be treated as less than, and I'm not going to treat others as if I'm more than them. And what that ripples out to mean is like all these different relational actions happen, all of these different beliefs shift, all of these ways of working and operating within these systems has the potential to change. And when we all are we get it, then we can go, wait, why is it that we accept that our primary child welfare intervention is removal and placement in stranger foster care for many children? Like that should no longer be the accepted norm. And instead, we're going to do this, and I feel like that's where we can shift our efforts and our energy, and look at how do we come in right relationship with communities, with families, with parents, and those with lived experience and children. Um, and how do we shift our way of living and being and doing. Like it's huge. That's what, to me, that understanding of right relationship and connectedness provides.
And I think there's something to be said about, at a global level, all the mental health issues that are happening, whether it's self-harm or suicidology, uh, you know, substance abuse, physical abuse, like all of those are manifestations of us being out of alignment with who we are and if you, in those systems of disconnection, right?
I think so. I think when we've experienced a lot of trauma and disconnect and separation, and maybe our relationships are not as strong as we wish they were within our family or within our community or culture, spirit, or with the earth and all of there's so many relationships. It's sometimes a little overwhelming to think about how do I have healthy relationships in all relationships, you know. And I think it's where we have to have patience and sort of humble ourselves and move with the speed of trust is something I've heard many people uh, say and share in Indigenous spaces as being a key component of relational healing. Um, but I think about everything in that relational way now, and I think about the the opportunity we have to stop the harm and stop the relational wounding and to reconnect and build and sustain healthy relationships where we can. We can shift our own beliefs and boundaries and those sorts of things so that we are in healthy relationship with others and then even within ourselves. Like we have this body. We have a body that is of the earth that we need to be responsible for and take care of. We have a mind, a brilliant mind. We have emotions. We have the spirit, you know, like how do we holistically take care of ourselves so that we can show up in these relationships in a good way? So that's that, again, that understanding that it's all of us doing our part in addressing and changing and shifting some of these dynamics that exist in our world.
I think this moves me to share what I experienced with you. You know, I came to know of your research. I thought you'd be the perfect guest to talk about connectedness, obviously, given the research that you've done and what you're putting, you know, bringing to light in the world. And you were interested, but you wanted to meet with me first. And we spent half an hour just chatting before we actually did this interview. And I
Mm.
loved that invitation because we were moving at the speed of trust together. And
Yeah.
I really respect that you requested that.
Mm. Thank
Yeah.
you. And thanks for accepting the invitation to meet and like get to know each other a little more. And yeah. And
How,
that's where I think, you know, everyone, I think everyone's doing the best they can with what they have and what they've been able to comprehend and process and reflect on and observe and become aware of. And so, like, we're all, what is the phrase? We're all perfectly imperfect human beings, um, doing the best we can in the time that we're in. And we receive feedback and we can change our minds and we can reflect on and look back at, oh, like I wish I hadn't approached it that way, or I wish I didn't talk to my daughter that way, or I swore I'd never do this and then I'm doing, you know, so to have grace and um to give ourselves that grace and to allow for the learning to happen, you know, and to be open to feedback. And that's such a central component to this as well. And it's all relational. I'm like, these are relational skills that we need to make sure our children and our peers and others learn and practice and um, continue to develop.
And all that you say, what rises up for me is the need to make more time for
Mhm.
connection.
Yeah.
That's really showing up for me. Like we need to invest time, our presence for those
Mhm.
relationships, whether it's taking a walk like you did
Right. Right.
at the water, or the coming together and cooking. Like
Mhm.
those are deeply healing to ourselves and to our community and to the world. And we need to give connectedness more time.
Right. Definitely. And I always used to tell, um, I used to be a supervisor. I was like, I want you to make the most out of the time you have. So you might not get to connect and see certain people as often and you know, as much as you wish you could, but make the most of it while you have that time together and that quality time versus just it's not always just about quantity, but the quality of the time is what can be really transformational. Yeah.
And take that to heart as I pick up my daughter in about 10 days to
Yeah,
go to a
right.
birthday party. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be living that. I'm gonna hold that
Yeah,
in my heart.
definitely. Hmm.
Huh. I wonder if you could speak to any baby steps of connectedness that you might want to surface or highlight as people are listening or watching. It's like, yeah, that does sound really good, but like, how do I start? Where do I start?
Yeah, I think that it's a personal journey for everyone in terms of what connected looks will look like for you and your understanding of it may be different from mine, and that's totally good. We can have multiple truths in one space. It's not a binary, it's not right or wrong. It just is. And I think some of the steps I'd recommend is, and this is something that I'm still engaging in myself, is to just really reflect on what some of the beliefs are that you have. And are there any beliefs that are maybe rooted or stemming from trauma? And that was something I didn't know or recognize before, how much those beliefs, because I did need to survive through some things and protect myself and sort of protect my heart and um, shield up a bit. And then I think that's been part of my healing journey is to question, well, where does that come from? And is that still true today? Because that's something I experienced then. This is now. So staying in the present. And then what do I want my future to be? What are the beliefs I can replace that with? So that's a big internal inner development process that is you do what works for you and you go in the kind of surges and spurts of focus and time on that. And then there's times to take a break and you're not always having to work on yourself and always be trying to heal and all this kind of stuff. It's like just let yourself be. And and I think connectedness is also a willingness um, to build relationships with others that you might not have ever thought you'd be building a relationship with, So like having that openness and um, kind of going, okay, what does my spirit feel? How does this opportunity feel? And should I take it? Because we can't do everything all the time for everyone in all ways, and that's part of the pressure and stress I think so many of us put ourselves under. But knowing when to say yes and when to decline and when to um, proceed and when to step back and all. So it's this whole dance and it's this whole flow of energy. And that's part of why I love the ocean so much. It's like there's definitely waves, and sometimes the ocean is calm and flat water, like in my background here on the screen. And other times, there's a churning that's happening and there's big ocean waves and there's storms and all, so like, that's a reflection in a mirror for us, I think, in many ways, that nothing is always stagnant, you know. Um, so to go with the flow, learn how to do that. I think that's what helps us cultivate these healthy relationships and how those healthy relationships lead to a healthy collective and to understand that's how important it is that we're healing and growing and connecting with one another once again.
Mm, I have so loved this conversation. I'm going to try to squeeze in two final questions.
Yeah.
What about, I don't know, God, whatever frame you want to use?
Mm.
So there's nature, there's us in the world, there's all the animals, the plants, the ocean, the moon, the stars. And then to creator, I heard you use
Yeah.
creator as
Mm.
the word. How do we
Yeah.
connect?
Yeah. So our Inupiaq term for that I've learned is Ngayun. And I was just talking to my teenage daughter about this the other day, where I feel like in our tradition, there is a respect for Ngayun, this concept of creator that made all of this possible. It's not chance. And I don't feel like in our stories it was just a big bang and luckily we all came to exist. It's like, no, there's like a design, a spirit, there's something behind this. And I think in our tradition as well, there was acknowledgement of multiple forms of spirit or in Ngayun in this physical realm that we're in. So like Sila is our term for weather, climate, air, atmosphere. And Sila was like a goddess almost. And we had a goddess of the ocean, Sedna, and we have all these stories. And it's like there's, in many ways, we're all creators and we're all co-creating this beautiful life. And what are some of the possibilities within that we haven't even started to comprehend or grasp or like um bring into fruition. But I do feel like there's a waking up that's happening to our own gifts, to this power that we have, power not in a bad way, but power in a good way, this power of creating the communities and the families and the relationships that we want. So I'm hopeful that, as we all start waking up and we're linking arms and we're finding each other and we're sharing this knowledge and we're learning and we're listening and we're then, you know, changing the trajectory of future generations in a
I'm,
good way.
I'm with you. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Since this is a podcast devoted to empathy, my last question is always to the guests. And thank you again for making this time. I wonder, Jessica, if you could think of a moment in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
Yeah. And I've reflected on this, even in this conversation. I feel like the earth has provided me empathy when I've needed it the most. And and I'm gonna get emotional thinking about this, but like, I feel like the earth has always been my one stable, steady source of love and connection. Like, and I get emotional about it because I think I look back and all the hard times that I've ever been through, I always felt like that was my solace. That was my place. My spirit was held and heard and nurtured and supported through those times. And so the earth is like, that's my answer, that the earth has shared so much empathy for me in powerful ways. And that's where I want to do what I can to be in right relationship and support this beautiful planet and help all of us, with that connection, and to have that gratitude and love for this amazing place that we get to live on.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that beautiful, beautiful offering. I think we can all walk around feeling sweeter about that. Mother Earth providing us empathy and never
Right.
always being there to hold us, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, I want to thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the work. I'm
Thank
going to have a
you.
ton of information in the show notes so people can learn more about your work and amplify it out to the world. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
And I want to thank everybody who's been watching and listening, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who'd benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Post the link on your socials and hit the subscribe button now. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.